and welcome to episode 7 of the Cynical Challenge podcast. My name is Grayson Knutson. Pleased to be joining you from Edmonton, Alberta. Also, as always, joined by my co-hosts. We start with Jeff Paulus in St. Albert. JP, a little t-shirt action, and the weather's nice. Yeah, you're rocking something a little warmer now.
Yeah, you have to. It's beautiful now. Ish.
Yeah, I was out in shorts today, so I mean,
Real. Nice.
Yeah. Wow, 10 degrees. The sun was out. Can't complain.
Yeah.
In Saskatoon, Jeff Salisbury, how's the weather down there?
Yeah, really good. I think it hit +2 maybe at some point this afternoon. It's gotten warm enough that all the snow is melting off the roof of my condo complex and pooling in front of my door and turning into ice overnight. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Great
Real
for
safe.
the ankle in the morning. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Why don't we just jump right into things? Big news day in the Canadian Premier League. Forge FC bringing back Tristen Borges, the 2019 Canadian Premier League MVP. If you saw the teaser on Thursday from Forge, you wouldn't be surprised that it's Borges. It seemed pretty obvious. It's going to be a full season loan as he comes back from his club in Belgium. He's still under that contract until June of 2022. So a full season loan. Tristen Borges back with Forge. If they weren't the favorites before, Sally, they definitely are now.
Oh, for sure. Let's look at it this way. He ran into really bad luck over in Belgium. He got signed by one manager, then that manager got turfed. They brought a new manager in who completely froze him out. I mean, I don't even know if he was in their 18 most of the time, let alone an 11. I think he had a run of maybe a couple of games early on, and then just seemed to quickly be pushed out of the squad completely. In fact, I think he was training with their reserves or with one of their youth teams even.
He had 4 appearances last year before the epidemic came through, and then they got promoted to the first division in Belgium, and he hasn't played since. They played 29 games. Actually, their last regular season game is tomorrow before they go into playoffs. OHL, I'm not going to try to pronounce the club name because it's out of my league. But so they're 7th in the table right now, so they should qualify for that second group of playoffs. So,
I mean, at the end of the day, it's hard. You know, we want so bad as Canadians, and we want so bad to be supporting the players in this league that we can succeed here and just go overseas and get a job, you know, playing in big leagues in Europe. And the reality is it's difficult. And, you know, their player base is much bigger. There's all sorts of reasons for it, you know, but I like what they've done here. I think this works for all parties, all 3 parties. I think it works for the club overseas. I think it works for Forge. Obviously, it works for Forge. They're getting the MVP, and they're 2-time defending champs, and they're bringing a 2019 MVP back to the same roster. And it certainly works for Borges. So, yeah, really, really smart move. What do you say about it? It's the best team getting better.
I'm just a little interested in, before you jump in, Sally, I'm just wondering why Borges is maybe not on that Olympic provisional roster. He's not on the 50-man roster, and it's not a Belgium thing because there's Charles-André Brim, who plays in Belgium as well, is on that roster. So you'd think if he was good enough, even if you didn't think he was going to play, you'd put him on the 50-man roster before you cut it to 20, but he's not on there. Anyways, maybe he just fell off the radar because he has been in camps with Canada. Did he get a cap last January when they played Bermuda? Yeah.
He did. In fact, I'm trying to remember if it was Bermuda or even the Iceland match that he might have also featured in for a little bit too, but he definitely had a cap against Bermuda. But yeah, I don't buy the idea that he's not good enough, because I genuinely do think he is good enough. I mean, he was heads and tails the best player in the league in the first season. When he was on the pitch for Forge, they were a totally different team. What they could do, what they could create was completely different than when he wasn't on the pitch for them. So, I mean, I really do think that it was unfortunate luck in his case in that managerial change happened with Levin. And he just, I don't know, it was something about that new manager. Just he didn't like Borges for some reason and tried to send him away as quickly as possible. I mean, why would they have picked him up? They were a club that was most likely going to be getting promoted anyway. And I think had COVID not hit, they were already sitting in a promotion position. they just had to play that playoff game, I think, because of the pandemic, if memory serves me right. But either way, why would they even bother bringing him over to a side that's looking at already almost guaranteed promotion, to just suddenly shuffle him down into playing with, I think it was beyond the reserves. I think he was actually training with their U21 squad or U23 squad or something like that. And that was it. And when it comes to the Olympic roster, I think it really just boils down to him not having seen any active minutes for so long. He had that run of 4 matches in a row. And I remember reading some of the match reports, and he was getting some praise. I think the first match, he was probably still getting used to things, and it didn't go as well. But then the second, third, and fourth matches, he was starting to get some praise for his play. And I want to say he even assisted on a goal in one of those first 4 games too, where they praised him on his vision for picking the pass. So, just really unfortunate luck. I still think he's a player that's going to end up either making his way overseas again, or maybe even depending on his performance this year, finding his way to MLS. So
109 minutes was Borges's total with that team in that season before the pandemic. JP, there's been a lot of cries about, well, how can Forge possibly find this in their cap? But this is a loan move, and you think that OHL is probably paying a majority of his salary, aren't they?
Yeah, there's a good possibility for that. It's not unheard of. I mean, there's free loans all the time, especially when the player, the club, when the club that's receiving a player is potentially guaranteeing minutes. It's more likely that loan could be free. If it's not that case, they might ask for you to cover some of the salary, but this could be a situation where it is free loan. And again, though, but Forges, I'm not privy to their books. I'm not privy to what their players make. But what I can tell you is that this is an extremely well-run organization that manages its cap very, very well. And I can say that quite openly without knowing the numbers, because they've managed to retain a majority of their roster. Where you're seeing a lot of turnover everywhere else because maybe players are wanting more money, asking to go. Clubs can no longer afford certain players, so you're seeing players change organizations. You don't see that with Forge players. They stay there. They're not leaving to other teams within this league. I think that's a great indicator of the job they've done to keep a roster happy. And obviously to keep under budget. So this is a good looking team. And the longer our roster stays together, we talk about communication. And as we're growing up, you hear, you must make communication, eye contact, all these things. But at the highest levels, communication is best when it's nonverbal. And you only get that when you play together for a long time. And that's what this team will bring here in year 3. So, yeah, they'll be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, you have to assume now that Forge is front runner once again. I mean, but that, to me, that is how big of an impact player Borges is. He's an X factor, in my opinion. He is a player that will once again help lead them to a 3rd title in a row. Unless some of the internationals that, let's say, York United have brought in are absolute world beaters for this league. I just don't think anybody in the league has the quality on the pitch now to be able to dethrone Forge this season. So a thought just popped in my mind, and I just wanted to explore it real quick. There's been chatter online about how long is it going to be before we see a CPL manager move up, kind of like how you want to see the players obviously moving up and on to larger leagues. So Jeff, this is a little bit more directed at you. How long do you think it's going to be before we see a current or even future CPL manager move up to a managerial role in a bigger league, whether it's MLS or potentially somewhere overseas? Obviously not the move that you made, but maybe somewhere a little higher up on the chain.
Yeah, a different one. Yeah, depending on this year, you could see some very similar moves to mine. I still think you need a bigger body of work. I think that some managers are getting, certainly they had some experiences coming into the league, whether it's PDL, whatever, but this league it's one season. You take away the tournament and you throw that out, honestly, even on my situation. I'm not trying to protect myself, but it's 7 games, and you're making a decision on players on managers in 7 games when managers can't control injuries. You can't control lack of training time, preparation time. So you take that, you throw it out. We have 1 year. We have 1 year under us. So these managers have 1 year to impress ownership groups. just not enough time. I mean, Mark DeSantos, you look at his pathway to MLS, and it was a long path that started off in Brazil before it came back here into Ottawa, and then down at Swope Park, and then obviously to San Francisco. He achieved success at every level, and I think that's what's going to need to be shown here from some of these managers, is that they continue with consistency, bigger body of work, and then some. Of course, why wouldn't they get a shot? You know, you look at the work they're doing throughout the league. So yeah.
So do you think?
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say. So do you think that we might see a managerial move in the future, more like a CPL manager taking over at a USL championship club, rather than potentially seeing them move right up into, say, like an MLS head coach position instead? And by the way, something's gone wonky with your headset. So
that's what I was going to say. Just try to unplug your headset and plug it back in, type of thing.
Oh, really?
Have you unplugged it and plugged it back in?
The old engineer's trick. That was anytime you call an engineer, the first thing you say, plug it in or unplug it, plug it back in.
Yeah. How's this?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Fixed it.
That's weird.
Amazing how that works. And they get paid what, like $100,000 a year to tell you that?
I know. Amazing. I think that the USL route, I think obviously when you look at the USL championship, and in particular the top half of that championship with those clubs, bigger moves for sure for a manager, bigger budgets, bigger environments. So you would think that would be a good move for a manager, looking to move up. Obviously, we hope that that becomes that here, that as the CPL grows, that we see the management and the levels just kind of increasing with opportunity, because our league keeps growing. It should be our league's goal should be the CPL's goal to kind of catch that USI into the USL level. And then I think these managers will be on their way.
It is our league. We are many, we are one. JP, don't forget that.
True. That's true.
Just another quick Forge note. They also brought back Mo Babuli, 2 goals, 2 assists across 14 matches in all competitions last year. So more offensive firepower up front for Forge, as again, they keep that core intact. And one final Forge note, Christian Jack reporting that Voyageurs Cup Final likely to be played at BMO on March 20th. Sounds like we've got a solid date. And if KJ's saying it, I'm apt to believe it, because he's probably the most well-known and well-sourced and respected journalists in the country when it comes to football. Toronto FC's been training. Forge FC officially hasn't. I'm sure Bobby and co have found a way to circumvent Ontario's health authority over their training sessions, but as a team, they're technically not allowed to train all together, whereas Toronto FC's filled out the application, et cetera, et cetera. That's less than 2 weeks from now, boys. Is this going to be a fair fight at all?
No, not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close. TFC's already been playing inter-squad matches, and Forge hasn't even gotten together as a squad once yet.
That we know of.
Exactly. But still, I mean, it won't be a fair fight. It won't be a fair fight at all. I wonder how long Tristen has already been with the team. Like, I wonder how long he's actually been back in the country and training with Forge. So maybe, even though they're only announcing him today, maybe he's already been training with them for the last, week, 2 weeks, even month. Same thing with Babuli. I mean, just because they're announcing something today doesn't mean that they haven't already been working out with the squad or parts of the squad, for that matter, for a few weeks, month even. But all that aside, definitely not a fair fight. I'm actually really pissed off at Canada Soccer with how they've handled this. I think it's been completely botched, in my opinion. Yes, I understand that we're in very different times, that it's a pandemic situation, but in my mind, there were definite opportunities back last year where I'm sure they could have fitted in. In fact, I remember it was either at the end of the Island Games, and where TFC had a lull where they probably could have come back and played the game in the country. And maybe there was another one at the end of or after TFC had been knocked out of the playoffs. Anyway, there were opportunities there that would have made for a much, much better battle. I mean, David Edgar would have still been able to have been involved, I'm sure. They've lost him. I mean, they Forge has definite question marks still. And TFC is practically bringing back an identical squad to what they had last year. So
I would like to see TFC. Remember, they were playing that almost round robin style against Vancouver and Montreal. I would like to see them fly out to Charlottetown for a game. And worst case, when Hamilton had to do their North American jaunt all throughout Central America and the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Surely they could have pulled up in Hartford, and we could have heard Brass Bonanza once they scored on Tristan Henry 2 or 3 times, right? JP, what are your thoughts on that? Like, should they have tried to squeeze it in? I know they probably didn't want to play in Hartford because, Voyageurs Cup Canada, let's keep it up north. But are you a little bit disappointed, or is this the best that they could have done?
No, a bit disappointed. At the end of the day, the Canadian Premier League is Canada Soccer's national league. We're Canada Soccer's domestic top flight league. So why aren't you taking care of it? That's the way I see it. Yeah.
No, that's
simple
fair.
as that for me. It's got to be a fair fight, and you've got a team that's in court that has social distancing rules for training, can't even actually probably get out and train based on their situation there. And it's just, it's not right. It's if it's a forced game without any consideration of that, it's poor decision.
The Canadian Premier League hopefully fast tracking something with Ontario Health so that Forge can at least get a couple sessions as a whole, provided they haven't, circumvented everything and that kind of thing. Sally, one more point.
Well, I was just gonna say that brings up one last quick little thing that is quite glaring in my opinion, is how has TFC managed to get the green light, the go ahead to be able to train as a full squad when Forge hasn't, and York United for that matter. I mean, they're in the same boat as Forge, quite frankly. Somehow TFC has managed to get that green light and Forge just hasn't. It doesn't seem like there's any type of fair playing field at this point either. So
it's my understanding that each team has to send in their application to whatever provincial health authority it is. The best comparison, I think, is looking at the NHL and the American Hockey League. The Toronto Maple Leafs, Ottawa Senators put in their plans and they were able to go. And so you're like, okay, well, surely that means that the Toronto Marlies and the Belleville Senators of the American Hockey League would be good to go too. But that's not true. They had to go and send their own applications in and get those approved by Ontario Health before they were able to even start practicing. So the Marlies and Senators, the farm teams, actually had to play their first 8 games of the American Hockey League season on the road because they didn't get approval to play games in Ontario up until the too late in the schedule was already created. So each team has to do it individually. I'm sure there's help from the league as well that helps to fast forward that process. And MLS is a pretty big entity when you compare it to the Canadian Premier League. Now, of course, I'm sure there's all sorts of backdoor stuff and whatnot going on. But
sorry, guys, I was just going to say, hopefully it's not a situation then where the CPL's not come in and said, well, we need this for all of our teams across the board. And then they've said no across the board because it's Canada-wide instead of taking care of the one team that actually needs it today.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you'd think that when your owner is nicknamed caretaker, that somebody would have been more on the ball and getting this set up for you then.
Yeah. It's weird. And every province is different too. So, I mean, there's a whole thing. CPL put out a tweet on Friday, which is today, saying that they had started their application process in October. And again, I'm sure the government was just swamped with applications, that type of thing. But anyways, I'm sure that's for someone a much higher pay grade than us to try to figure out. Quick note before we get into our next talking point: Stephen Hart, 3-year extension with HFX Wanderers. Good work for him. Going to be out there continuing to build what he's already started on. Good little base in Halifax. I'm sure the Wanderers supporters are pretty happy to see Hardy still out there. I know, JP, you want to talk a little bit about a move that Cavalry made. David Norman Jr., 22 years old, was supposed to play with Inter Miami of MLS last year, got hurt in the preseason, didn't actually play with Miami. They declined his option. He's a free agent. Signs with Tommy Wilden Jr. and Cavs. He played 8 games with Pacific on loan from Vancouver in 2019. What do you like about this young midfielder?
Sorry, my dogs are going crazy here.
It's unbelievable. Bit, but...
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this is a real good depth signing for them. You look at that roster and you look the 2 players deep. I mean, I guess if I give any comment that wouldn't be a positive one, although I've been very positive about the signing for them, is that they really do have now a congested central midfield with very similar players. I find that their midfield are all very similar in demeanor, the way that they're going to play. So, yeah.
No, it's a good point. And I would like to say, I know we talked about Borges not playing, and maybe that's why he's not on the Olympic roster. Norman is. He was the only unattached FC member on that roster. Of course, now he's with Cavalry. So good move there by Tommy to increase numbers in midfield. Another news bomb, those late Friday news dumps that people like to do. Sally, start with you. Marcel de Jong, longtime stalwart for Canadian men's national team, 56 caps, 3 goals. He's hung him up. He's called it quits at 34 years old. Only played 9 matches with Pacific over these past 2 seasons. 7 last year at the Island Games, only 2 because of that horrific Achilles injury that surprisingly he was actually able to come back and play 2 matches in 2019. Maybe just your thoughts on MDJ, Sally.
Yeah, first off, a real shame to see him hanging up the boots. Always loved watching Marcel play. I remember some goals that he scored for the men's national team. There was one in particular, I'm pretty sure it was against Honduras in a friendly, might even been the Gold Cup. It was a free kick from a little ways out, and he just got a hold of it and bent it a bit around the wall. It took a single bounce and went in the corner. And I remember watching it with the fellas down in Regina, the Kelman twins and Robin. I even managed to drag my brother out to watch that game. But yeah, that was Marcel who buried that one. And I think we ended up winning that one too. Ever since he popped his Achilles, he really hasn't been the same player. He just wasn't the same player last year at the Island Games. You could tell that he was a little bit he was a little off pace. He still has great vision. You just don't lose something like that. But I wonder if physically he was maybe not feeling the best, having some hard recoveries after games. And just his body was telling him it was time. So yeah, ultimately it's a real shame. But maybe it's simply another case of underpaying the players. Maybe he's found a role that's still involved in the game where he's going to practically double his salary. I'm sure it wouldn't be hard.
Yeah, those Achilles injuries are just nasty to try to come back from, especially I'd say older, but like it happened when he was 32. You are towards the end of your footballing career at that point, and it's really hard to come back from, especially in football and basketball too, where there's a lot of jumping. I know some players have had careers ended, late 20s due to Achilles injuries in basketball. So JP, you've had some experience coaching against him and seen the guy off on the pitch. So just your thoughts on Marcel de Jong here.
Yeah, disappointing news to hear that today. Certainly, I think he's not only a leader for that team, he was good for the league. For me, he's like a Nick Ledgerwood, and you kind of get these, the players at that age that have really, have been around the national team program for a long time. They were really, for me, the leaders of the CPL. When you look at Canadian internationals that have come back to play in this league and help build the league from ground up, so you're really sad when you see those players leave it, because now you're trying to find the next ones that come after them that kind of hold or take over the mantle that they held. And so yeah, tough to replace for that team, of course. But I just think a loss for the CPL and for our fans.
And big with PFA Can too as well. Obviously, lots of work and getting the union set up, and hopefully, I'm not sure what he's got planned, but maybe it'd be nice to see him kind of take over, the presidential role of the union, and in addition to whatever else he's going to do. So, best wishes to Marcel de Jong on the next chapter of his life, really, as we move on here. Next up, we're done with CPL talk, and it is time to dive into the big rumor, the big news. It's not really an announcement because it wasn't technically announced this week, but a long swirling rumor that the Canada will see a Division II pop up beginning next year full time. And I know a lot of you are probably watching this or listening to this thinking that, well, we saw where the original leak came from, what organization, and there's a guy here who may work for that organization, and he's just going to spill the entire pot. And I know that's not going to be the case. We're going to treat this professionally. We're going to treat this as if he has no knowledge of it. We're just going to talk about what it would do for soccer in this country. That's what we're going to talk about. JP, why don't we start with you? Division II. We haven't had one really before. I guess you could maybe consider FC Edmonton, Ottawa Fury when they were in NASL underneath the Canadian MLS teams as a Division II in Canada. But right now we don't have anything like that. So what does this do, or what would this do for football in this country?
Well, it completes a pyramid. I mean, the easiest answer is it completes the pyramid. I mean, I feel like it's a bit of Spinal Tap where I am goes up to 11, and we're not going to worry about 10. You know, we've got a pyramid that starts at Div 1 and drops off to Div 3 for some reason. So there's a middle piece there missing. You know, this is, you know, I think anytime you look at increasing a development pyramid in this country, I think you have to look at it in a positive way. And you know, there actually wasn't a lot said at our AGM, by the way. You know, so there was more said in that little kind of comment by an anonymous source. You know, I love this. People can't use their names anymore. There was more said in that little tweet than was actually than anything that was mentioned at our AGM. So a lot of speculation on that. You know, this is, again, when you look at the Canadian landscape and you think of how are we going to develop more players, you start off with of course, you have the 3 MLS teams, but they're outside of our pyramid. They're playing in American League, and of course, they're playing in a league that's not interested in developing Canadians. So let's bring it back just to our domestic leagues that are focused on developing young Canadian players. Of course, our 3 MLS teams are. I'm not slagging them off. They've done more than anybody in this country to develop the player pool that we currently have now in our World Cup teams on the men's side. So I'll say that. Domestically, though, you look at the CanPL is here to design young Canadian or develop young Canadian players, bring back some senior ones that have been overseas and really build up something, you know, to be our highest level of play here. Underneath that, what we have then is the Ontario League One, PLSQ, and there's a new league starting in BC at the Division 3 level. Now, when you look in the CPL then, and I'm going to use my own example of this, last year we had 5 kids under the age of 20. Last year, you know, when you look at Prince, Marcus, David Doe, Anthony Caceres, and Chance Carter. And then you look at also 3 of those are with us in 2019. And yes, we were able to get enough minutes for all of them, a lot because of Easton and Garrett ate up a lot of those minutes in 2019 too. But what happens when they're not playing? And right now, that's the question. What happens to these young kids in the Canadian Premier League that aren't getting enough minutes? Because that's part of their development. So we've got these 17, 18, 19-year-olds not getting any minutes, or they get the bare minimum, just enough to satisfy a league requirement, but they don't really, that's it. So a Division 2 league probably provides a place for them to play. You know, at the end of the day, when you're looking at how can these players get game minutes in, well, that's it. And then what's better, getting a player playing game minutes in a Division 2 league that's run professionally, that's training maybe as much as the Div 1 league is training, or playing him in the AMSL. What's going to be better for that top player? So again, you just look at rounding out a pyramid. I mean, I'll let you guys jump in. I've got there's obviously, you know, you see a lot of social media, and I can answer some of there's been some criticisms I've read. I can answer some of those after, but sure. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are.
Sally, initially, I just want to ask you as a fan, what does that news leak do for you? Does it provide you with hope? Does it get you excited? Are you cautious? What's your thoughts? Did we lose Jeff?
Stunned into silence.
You didn't hear anything of what I said, did you? I don't think he can hear anything at all anymore.
I don't think he can hear us right now, Gray. Let's talk some dirt.
Go ahead, Sally, talk.
Well, I'll say, first off, before I forget it, I want to say that I want to announce now that I'm going to put a club into this new league, and people are going to be like, what's this club called? And I'm going to say, well, the better question is, who is the club for? And I'm going to tell them the club is for Jeff. See?
Oh. It was bad enough today that Forge signed Borges, and my ears started to bleed thinking of Gareth Wheeler going Borges 14 times a season. Now we got this coming from you. Come on.
Yeah,
bro.
I know. You know,
that was over my head. I missed that.
We'll just have to rewatch our episode.
You'll get it.
Jeff,
You'll get it.
to get it. Yeah.
All right.
So I think and was that original question actually for me and not JP? Well, it was for me. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I was waiting for JP to answer.
The show has gone off the rails, boys.
Honestly.
Yeah. You better edit this one down a little bit there, Gray.
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
keep that in. That's the first time he's been quiet. So as episode 7, first time he's been quiet. Keep that in the episode.
That's right.
Oh,
Thank you for that joke. That joke was amazing. So,
Sally,
uh,
I wanted you a fan's perspective.
fans' perspective.
Does it excite you, or do you have some cautions? Like, what's your thoughts?
Okay, so we're gonna start off on the cynical side because otherwise we'd betray our own name. And the cynic in me is worried that if there isn't already any type of relationship between the new league and the CPL / Canadian soccer business, that we might be looking at a MLS versus all of the Div 2, Div 3 leagues that have ever shown up in the US. And we know what an absolute raging dumpster fire US soccer has been over the last however many years when it comes to all the different pro leagues, and it's both men's and women's too. I mean, down there, you just light a match and dumpsters blow up all over the place. But the cynic in me is a little worried that, hopefully we're not going to be becoming USA North when it comes to how things happen with the leagues below the top tier league. So for the love of God, I really hope that there is some type of support, at least, and it sounds like there's support from Canada Soccer. It sounds like Canada Soccer is fully on board with everything that's happening. So that actually does give me hope that, okay, it's not going to end up being the US soccer MLS some cabal that is controlling everything and stopping any other league from ever having any success. In this case, if Canada Soccer is fully on board, that it's going to be something that's going to be allowed to grow and flourish. And then the other side of the coin, the non-cynical and excited side, gives me hope again that Saskatchewan's going to see a club, because I think the pandemic hitting and all that really threw a wrench into everything that was happening here. Joe Bellin is who I mean when I say Joe. Joe had gotten things up and running with the Sask Summer Soccer Series, which I was fortunate enough to be a part of to some degree. And we had that series of 3 matches a couple of summers ago. Things were really going well. I know that he had plans on having an even larger version of that last summer, and it was actually going to start off with a friendly match between the SK Selects and FC Edmonton. And Jeff, you would have been there, and we would have been throwing hilarious chants about your baldness at you the whole time. But the pandemic hit and it just derailed absolutely everything. We had plans. The wheat pool was going to be right opposite of the River City Vanguard or River Valley Vanguard. Like, we were going to be right across from each other inside the SaskTel Center, the artificial turf center that we have here. And we were going to be able to just go back and forth with the chanting. And it was going to be absolutely, we had a TIFO plan that was going to span the entire length of the one side of the pitch that everybody was on. Like, it was going to be absolutely magical. And then the pandemic hit and threw it all to shit. Well, pardon me, I guess you'll have to blank that out.
Absolutely not.
But yeah, so I mean, the fan side, really excited. I mean, I think this is the missing link, if you will. This is the Lucy of Canadian football, hopefully, and it's going to now, like Jeff said, it's going to finalize that professional league pyramid, where we'll have those regionalized tier 3 leagues, hopefully across the entire country. We'll have the Division 2, however it fully takes shape, maybe an East-West split, maybe it's a little bit more regionalized regardless. And then we'll have the CPL at the very top, sort of the golden triangle at the very top, or at least that's the way Bob Young probably likes to think of it. So, yeah, I think as long as the relationship between all the different tiers and in a way that they're all working together and it actually creates that healthy pyramid, we're going to see Canada become a regular World Cups in the next 20 years. I'd say that's what's going to happen. That's what it's going to do.
You need a generation to cycle through, is what you're saying.
At least one generation. You need 2 generations to cycle through, I think.
JP, what is the relationship between the Canadian Premier League and all these leagues, which wouldn't be, owned by the same groups of people? what do those relationships have to look like in order for something like this to succeed?
Well, they have to be cordial. I mean, I think that the trick is if it's going to work, and again, I don't have any extra information that anyone's looking for that I can add any more to the conversations that are on Twitter right now, being talked about. I approach this from a player development standpoint. I think that the communication has to be good between the different tiers throughout, from tier 1 down to tier 5, whatever it looks like. But everyone just has to know where they're at and what their reason of existing is. Canadian Premier League is our Division 1 top domestic league. We know that. Everyone knows that. So Division 2, if that comes in, if that is a thing here in this country, it has to know that its places to develop players for the Canadian Premier League. And conversely, then Division 3 should be pushing players to Division 2 or straight up to Division 1. But as long as everyone knows where they fit in this hierarchy, in this pyramid, then football works. And it's no different. I mean, it works everywhere else in the world this way. Everywhere else, and here though we let politics get involved, we get ownership of things get involved, and it ruins it. But everywhere else it seems to work, and I don't think there's any disagreements in England about what the goal is of teams in the lower divisions from the Premier League and where they're trying to get players to, where they're trying to sell players to. This is quite normal, and it can work here the same way. And to go back to the one comment you made, Jeff, the MLS, versus Division 2s, there was certainly an MLS versus NASL bit of a controversy, because NASL wanted to compete directly with the MLS, but be kind of a European league. So wanted the European model and football around the rest of the world versus, the league controlled, almost not quite single entity, but almost single entity, kind of what the MLS was, and as far as its governance. So there's a problem there, but I would say that USL and MLS have developed quite a nice relationship, to the point where there's either MLS2 teams in that league or independent teams that affiliate with MLS teams. I think they've nailed it. It's different ownership groups, doesn't need to be the same, but I think we could look to USL because it's got every single level down now. When you take the USL Championship, USL League 1, 2, PDL, it's completed that American pyramid, and they're better off for it. Different ownership groups, all working towards the same goal. Great relationship. Why couldn't something like that work in this country?
It didn't always used to be like that, though. And my argument is that MLS and some kind of beat USL into having to be like that, in the sense that, it became very clear that a lot of ownership groups were only entering into USL because it became a direct pathway into having a shot at gaining entry into MLS, as long as they had the money, right? I mean, the money is always what talks down there. But it never used to be like that, because USL used to have clubs. I mean, hell, USL still has an issue with clubs folding after only a season or two of existence. In fact, there were a couple of clubs that were looked at as some of the more shining lights in that league that ended up folding here in the last couple of months. And then there's things that have happened where, like, I want to say it's Sacramento. I think it was Sacramento was the club that was going to be making the move to MLS, but part of the ownership group pulled out, and now that club looks like it's in absolute shambles.
Yeah.
And I worry about that happening up here, because it feels like when things like that happen, it damages the sport. Like the sport in the US, I mean, there's enough money behind football in the US now that it's more insulated from really getting as damaged as it used to. But back in the 90s and in the early 2000s, or from to the 2000s up to 2010, maybe even a little bit into the 2010s, anytime clubs folded, it damaged the sport, and it damaged the sport in that specific market, and I think it worries me a little bit that if there aren't really good relationships already, and if there isn't that full dedicated backing from Canada Soccer as the national sanctioner, that I would hate to see us fall into some of the pits that has happened down in the States. I mean, the Yanks can go to hell as far as I'm concerned when it comes to football, but I just don't want us to run into any of those same issues that they've run into down there. I'm hoping that we can learn from their continuous mistakes and be better from it.
And I just, Grayson, because I know I'll actually play your role for a second if I could.
Oh, I had a good
'cause
question.
you're
but
always-
yeah, go ahead.
No, do you? Do you want to go?
I didn't want to like pile on the cynicism here, but I just wanted to throw this out maybe to the both of you. Let's be real. There's a growing distrust for the leadership group atop the Canadian Premier League. There is, whether it's from supporters. I'm sure the clubs are still vested, et cetera, et cetera. Is a Division 2 too soon? Is a league like this something that could come in and usurp what the Canadian Premier League has done, do damage to the foundation it started to lay, and kind of take people from CPL to this Div 2 and eventually be the downfall of it? Are we moving too fast? Is maybe the question that I have. JP, maybe you want to start, and Sally, you could comment afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, it goes back to, I think, my other earlier comment where I think when we allow and we have different divisions come into this country's pyramid, I think there's very strict guidelines in knowing that where you are in the pyramid. And I think that's Canada Soccer driven, that here's your mandate as a Division 2 league. It's not to compete against Division 1. It's not to compete for players against Division 1 teams. It's to provide the next players for that league, and it's to work with that league outside of a different ownership. And, my everything about me, my DNA really it always jumps back into player development. And this is why I think I've lost weight and I've lost gray hair, and I'm starting to feel better because I'm back in player development again. And I'm doing really
good.
What makes me feel good. Yeah, I'm trying. Thanks. I'm joking. But can we put a price on player development? So where I throw that out there is, can we really afford in this country where we want to develop more players? Can we afford just to allow, the 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 owners that can afford to purchase a position in a Division 1 league to be the ones that are going to develop players for us? So at what point do we say, well, there is other avenues to develop players at good levels here, and it doesn't necessarily take spending a big money in an entrance in a league fee, for example. So why did owners go to the USL instead of going to MLS? Because MLS had a $200 million price tag to join it. That $200 million can sure go a long way. Not even to a fourth of that would build an outstanding USL championship program, developing a lot of players, running a full academy. So this is where I think that the conversation goes to a little bit for me is I do think they can get on. I think that CPL, we all need to support it. We need a Division 1 league in this country to survive. We should be throwing all of our support behind this league, and leadership questions and comments and concerns and some of the stuff we're seeing online, of course, and the union talk and stuff. Okay, I understand that people aren't happy about that, but at the end of the day, regardless on what we think of different aspects of people, leagues, whatever, we need this league as Canadians that follow football to survive. And that's where our energies need to go. A second league coming in that is underneath that's helping that league survive because they're going to develop a greater pool of players at a better level than what's currently out there being developed, I would say, is good for the league. And they can work together.
There's no concern then you don't think about, people. Let's just say, okay, in Toronto, there's York, TFC, Hamilton to an extent. If they get another couple of teams in there that are Div 2, you're not worried at all about people not being a fan of the ownership groups in the Canadian Premier League or at York or at Fords. Those are bad examples because they actually have really good ownership groups. But you're not worried about fans from those teams leaving them, going to support this Div 2 group. All of a sudden, there's not as much support for the top level. Fans decrease. There's not as much revenue coming in. Those teams are in trouble. You're not worried about that at all?
I'm not. No, I think that's small. And this also goes for the Ontario League 1 and PLSQ teams, because those Ontario League 1 teams, I'm not sure this would be a lot different in the sense that the Ontario League 1 teams are community driven. A lot of them are club-based driven. A lot of them have youth programs underneath them. So if anything, I think that these programs at the lower levels in the pyramid can be used to really drive community growth for soccer, community support. And then I think that support, because now what can happen is if we start again right now, so Ontario League 1, and there's a lot of players that have played Ontario League 1 and moved into CPL, PLSQ as well. But what happens then is if these programs are community based, a lot, if they're in particular, if they're club driven, well, now you got this huge group of families that have seen this kid come through their club, and all of a sudden that kid gets signed from their club to York. I think you've gained fans. I think York has gained fans because of this kid out of this club that they've watched grow up. They've watched play on their Ontario League One team, potentially a Div 2 team. They're now playing in the top league. They're playing with the big pros now. I think that creates a fan base, and I think that helps grow that league.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Well, I'm going to be the cynic for a second, and I'm going to tackle what I think is a little bit of the elephant in the room, considering who one of the three of us is that if Scottish is a club that ends up joining this Div 2 league, of all the clubs in the CPL that I think could suffer the worst from this is FC Edmonton. Because FC Edmonton already has probably the weakest attendance than any of the clubs in the league. I'm trying to remember. I want to say FCE had the lowest attendance, I think, of all 8 clubs, or all 7 clubs, sorry, in that first season.
Second lowest. Settle down.
It's the example I wanted to use but didn't want to use, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I hear it, but I think we have to. I think we'd be cheating our hundreds of thousands of fans here if we didn't.
100-ish.
Yeah, but I think if Scottish came in, they have a massive connection to the soccer community in that city, way more than FCE has managed to create in the last decade. And I do worry that Dave and Tom might see great success for Scottish out of the gate. And they're already taking a beating in their pocketbooks, I'm sure, from the cost of running the club, not only in the NASL days, but now they moved into the CPL. And I wonder if they just say, we just haven't been able to create that fan base that we want, that we need to make this truly viable. And we might have the first CPL club that's genuinely in crisis of folding. And I mean, that would severely damage the CPL for a club to fold. And I'm not saying that Scottish shouldn't have ambitions to have that tier of a team playing within its ecosystem, but I just wonder how much damage could it actually do. Full stop. I am fully in favor of this Div 2 happening. I think it's awesome, but a part of me is still a little shaky about the idea that this could do a bit of damage, and there need to be discussions that happen behind the scenes to make sure that these elephants in the room get looked at, get talked about, that nobody's feet are going to be getting stepped on. And I think it comes down to another thing that's always needed discussions is the women's pro game in this country. I mean, that's something else absolutely needs to have discussions. I know that Carmelina Moscato was basically in charge of looking at the viability of creating a women's pro league. At least at one point, one of her roles was that. And I just feel that that's never truly been tackled. However, it looks like we might have female components of this Div 2 happening as well. So how about that for a segue, fellas?
Yeah, we are getting a little bit short on time, but why don't we try to quickly chat about the women's portion of the Div 2, which I guess would kind of run concurrently to the men's portion, maybe a little bit smaller scale. Like if there was 8 Western teams, 8 Eastern teams on the men, maybe 6 and 6 or 5 and 5, something like that. But I think that's brilliant. We've needed some kind of pro structure for the women in this country for forever. And I think, JP, you said it last week, we were one of the first ones to start investing dollars into the women's game, and it somehow never wound up with a professional league. So I think I'm more excited about the women's part of this than I am about the Div 2 men part. My concern is that it might be too soon, but what are your thoughts there, JP?
I should start right away, is my thoughts. If we've got the appetite and the will to put a couple teams in UWS, so again, all credit goes to Foothills, of course. They started that with Troy being their head coach, and coach. I think Troy's been the only coach of the year for the last, he's won it every year. And now he, of course, has come into St. Albert as their technical director and brought this idea with him to St. Albert. They've put a team in here. Fantastic. We've got 2. But if we can do this in an American league, Certainly there's enough Troy Flannerys around this country to do this locally. And again, regional based leagues do not require a lot of money. They don't require a big buy-in. They don't require a big league fee. They require enough people that have ties to a community, because again, if the fees aren't there, if the cost is way down because it's regionalized, you take away travel, a lot of other expenses, you work with the universities. You don't have to have as many fans come out, but I'll tell you, when the expenses aren't that high, there's going to be you're going to find more Troys there. You're going to find more foothills out there, and you're going to see an appetite to make it work. So why wouldn't you launch this right away? What are we waiting for? I guess is my question always. FC Edmonton started promoting, spending, contributing quite a good bit of money to make the women's program here work with the Rex program in Edmonton. And we started doing that in our second year of our academy. We started funding the female program as well. That's a long time ago, and nothing's happened, and to the point now where FC Edmonton's out of that market. So there's a place here for someone to take it up. So well done to St. Albert for picking up the mantle right now. But why? Again, we don't need to tie player development and league development to big, massive corporate sponsorship and to big leagues that charge, a league fee to get into the league. We don't need to do that to make a women's program work across our country. We need people to get together and say, listen, what's it going to cost to get a commissioner in? Great, let's do it. Let's start a league. Yeah. Done. Honestly,
that's what Sally said last week, right? Just start the conversation. Just get it going.
Yeah. So that's where my mindset is, guys. Why wait?
Yeah. I'm sure we could talk about this for forever, but we've reached that time. We got to stop now, or we're going to go on for 3 hours. So quickly go around the horn. JP, you start. Where can we find you online?
Jeff_Paulus, just on Twitter, and we should maybe spend a bit of time in the next show on the women's game and really do it a good service here, because we need to push this. Every footballer in this country should be pushing a women's league.
Yeah.
Sally?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Jeff D. Salisbury. You can always find me in the different CPL chat groups on Facebook and the Voyageurs group on Facebook. I'm on the CPL Discord, or the Canadian Soccer Discord, really is what it should be called at this point. And I love that around the horn call there, Gray. That was invoking some Rob Notenboom for a moment.
Well, if I could be half the podcaster Rob is, then I think we've got something here, boys. So
next episode you're gonna be chiming in all the time, I guess, or something. Hey?
When Jeff had that freeze earlier in the show, I think we probably should have went to Rob first.
We got the wrong Sasky kid.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah. Well, it's shame that we have two Jeffs on this show, because it gets confusing.
It throws me for a loop, boys, because I want to be like, hey, Jeff, talk about this. That's why we messed up earlier. But anyways, you can find me at Grayson Knutson on Twitter. Follow us at the Cynical Chow 1 on Twitter. That's the vodcast podcast handle. Search us at the Cynical Challenge on YouTube. We're on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and the whole 9 yards. And again, don't be shy to comment, tag us in stuff. Let us know what you think we should talk about as well. Tell us we're idiots, whatever. We don't care. We can take it. Jeff's heard a lot worse, both of you. So we'll get together.
I have definitely heard a lot worse, Grayson.
Mostly from the foot soldiers.
Hey, can we also just one more shout out? Someone made a lot of comments about NASL versus USL and all the big problems there. If that individual wants to know what really happened in NASL, call me. I was in it. So I can tell you the real story, honestly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, next week let's catch up on some CPL news, and then we'll try to dive deeper into why a Div 2 women's league is so important. How's that sound, guys?
Love it.
Yep.
All right. See you then.
Cheers.
See you, everybody.